Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. Mpumi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, sir.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. For those who don't know me, my name is Donald Mackay. I'm the CEO of XA Global Trade Advisors. We were previously known as XA International Trade Advisors, and today, while we release this new and important report, it's also the relaunch of our brand new brand, our new website, xagta.com. Our business is moving into an interesting era. For those of you who have clients or who could be future clients of ours, welcome and thank you for taking a little bit of time out this morning. Let me tell you a little bit about what this report is, why it's an important report, and how we'll be dealing with this going forward. So, and of course, my technology is letting me down. This report looks at open import duty related cases. So there are 4 types of duty mechanism that we're going to refer to. The first 2 fall within the ambits of something called the normal customs duty, and a rebate of duty is simply a reason to not have to pay the customs duty or to pay a lesser amount. This could be related to lack of available quantity locally, or it could be related to a particular quality that you require which is not available locally. The important point is that a customs duty's objective is to provide protection for the domestic industry. Anti-dumping duties deal with a very particular circumstance of dumping, where goods are sold at a lower price into South African market than they are in their home market, and that such discounted product entry in the market causes material injury to the domestic industry. And then we have safeguard duties. Safeguard duties are there to offset an unexpected spike in import volumes. They don't allege a particular offense like an anti-dumping case, but they do say that the domestic industry needs some temporary relief. And so these could be considered, if you like, an emergency measure. So this report has ended up, in fact, just looking at the first 2 categories, because we have no other categories which are overdue. So this is all about those cases which should have been resolved and which are not. We're going to talk about what the extent of that is, what the economic implications are of not resolving these cases and finalizing them. And then we're going to put together some recommendations of what we can do to bring these matters to closure. For any of you wishing to ask questions, I'd ask that you just post it in the question box. I promise no question will be left unanswered by the end of this. Even if there's some uncomfortable ones, we will deal with them. All right, moving on. So why did we do this open cases report? And I think this is my apologies. This is a really important question to come to grips with. Localization, which we've seen all over the media, is a critical part of government strategy, economic strategy. So there's a quote I'm going to read quickly. A focus on localization is therefore at the heart of government strategy to create sustainable jobs for South Africa and build the economic base for long-lasting prosperity. This comes from Minister Patel's policy statement on localization for jobs and industrial growth issued last year. So what does this have to do with localization? Well, if you look at our economic policy as a set of Russian dolls, you have the economic policy. Within that, one of the key policy directions is industrial policy. And then within industrial policy, there is trade policy. And the primary lever that you can pull for trade policy are duties. And so duties become an extremely important component of how our economic policy works. Whether this is a good reason or a bad reason is not something we're debating in this presentation. We'd like to just describe the extent of the delays and what their potential implications are. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see this on every slide. We talk here about the cost of indecision. So if we have a look at all of the current tariff applications to increase duty, if they had been completed on time, we would have potentially collected another 1.25 billion rand in duties. And if you look at all of the cases requesting duty relief, either in the form of a rebate or a reduction, we would have put 2 billion rands worth of tax collections back into the pockets of the sectors that applied. Now, this is not to judge whether the duties should or shouldn't go up. Maybe some should and some shouldn't. All we're saying is, if you got what you wanted and what you had requested, and that decision had been taken within the timeframes that the cases are meant to be resolved in, then this would be the position. So according to ITAC, on their website, a tariff investigation is meant to be finalized within 4 months for an industry in distress and for 6 months for just a normal application. Anti-dumping applications have to be finalized within 18 months. Rebate applications, which are also a part of the tariff regime, have the same 4 and 6 month requirement. Safeguards, strangely enough, don't have a specific requirement. However, they are deemed to be an emergency measure, so one must assume that they should be completed within at least the amount of time of an anti-dumping case. We have no overdue, safeguard, or anti-dumping applications. And although we deal with some information in the report, we're not going to touch on those in the presentation. So if we have a look at how long it, on average, takes for a tariff investigation to be completed. So ITAC came into existence in 2003. And the breakup here, the vertical lines that you see are important moments that we need to consider. So I'm starting from the right, moving left. In 2015, localization officially becomes a policy. And in that period, the average from then till the end of 2020, we would take in, on average, 320 days to complete an investigation. In the prior 6 years, we would take in 191 days. So this is the period when we first start to see Minister Davies at that time publishing his international policy action plans, and all 10 of those. So they sit predominantly in this period. And then we have the period before that. There's a little bit of that period that is with Minister Davies and some with Minister Alec Irwin. So we're up till the end of 2020, our periods have run all the way back to where they were before we started our IPAP plans. When we release the next version of this report, which would be in January next year, we will have updated this to take us all the way through to probably the middle of 2022. But looking at that at the moment, it looks as if that line will be moving further up to the right again. In other words, cases are once again taking longer and longer. Importantly, if you look at the first part of this chart, you will see it ends with the period going down. It's getting faster, and then it remains fairly quick, although still far beyond what it should be. And then you see the trend on the latter part is actually moving up. So it's getting slower and slower as time goes by. So I'm going to give you an example of a particular product here. So Sumitomo, a tire manufacturer, applied for duty relief on styrene butadiene rubber, which is a kind of artificial rubber that you use to make tires. In their application, they said there's no local manufacturer of SBR in the SACU region. The customs duty on SBR imposes additional input costs in the tire manufacturing process. That is extracted directly from their application. That case is currently 22 months overdue at a cost of 34 million rand paid in duties. It also appears to have been completely unopposed. Ironically, Sumitomo are currently applying for anti-dumping duties on imported tires while receiving no relief on their raw materials. And of course, this would probably not just apply to Sumitomo, but also to the 3 other big tire manufacturers. So there's a very weird situation that we're leaving in a cost in the supply chain, which is making the supply chain less efficient. But at the same time, we're looking to add a cost to the end of the supply chain to drive up the cost to the consumer. And these sorts of very strange situations don't only exist with tires. I'm going to give you one more example, but if you go through the actual report, you'll see pages and pages of tables which identify products and essentially give you the same information. So here we have another company called BRM. They're a manufacturer of value-added meat products. And they asked for a rebate of duty on chicken wings. And chicken wings, they are definitely produced locally, but not in the quantities that the market requires. We haven't yet engineered a 6-winged chicken. And so BRM have run perpetually short of chicken wings. I'm sure there are other consumers of wings which find themselves in the same position. That application is 9 months overdue at a cost of 83 million rand paid in duties. Now, to be clear, this problem could be relatively easily solved. You could either supply the wings or you could supply the duty relief. And if the wings were available in adequate quantity, you could take away the duty relief. And when they're short, you could put it back in. This is something known as a temporary rebate, and it works just fine. What we're sitting with here is not a rejection or an acceptance of the argument put forward, but simply nothing at all. No decision taken, all is absolutely silent. So when you're applying for a duty change of any sort, we believe that there's certain criteria that should be applicable when you make your application. So the first is everything you need to know about your application and how it will be assessed should be easily available. You need to know what steps your application will go through before a decision is made. You need to get some sense of how long it will take for the process to be finalized. You need to know who takes the final decision against what criteria, and if there's anything expected of you in turn for getting what you requested, you should know what that would be up front. Now, on all 5 of these criteria, we have various degrees of failure. Importantly, you are not aware upfront on the information required for your application to be assessed, which takes us to the point of reciprocal agreements. So what happens here is you've applied for a duty increase or a removal of duties. At the end of the process, before you can get what you've requested, there's an additional requirement placed on you, which is you've got to give something in return. And we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. This is not explicit upfront when you make your application. It feels obvious if you read the regulations and the Act who takes the final decision, but we'll talk a little bit later on and we'll very quickly see that in fact that is not clear at all. And this could be one of the reasons why we have these delays. Although ITAC publish that your matter is meant to be resolved within 4 to 6 months, this has almost never, ever been done. So when we do our analysis, we look at the longer period, the 6-month period, and say, let's assume nothing was urgent, despite the fact, in fact, that some of the applications were deemed very urgent by government themselves. But then once the information was submitted, again, all went quiet. So if you have a look over here, these cases right now are the cases that are currently open. Again, if you look at the detail in the report you'll be getting, you will be able to see the detail of these cases. Importantly, is not the detail of each of these, but that on average, across all investigation types, for every case that is currently open, all 46 of them, we're averaging 16.5 months to wrap up an investigation, which is quite a long time when you compare it to the committed period of of 4 to 6 months. So quite a big difference. Interestingly, in this very protectionist environment that we're in right now, duty increases are taking over 2 years to go through the process. So this is quite a disconnect from the message around localization, the urgency to take action, but the reality is the actions don't appear to actually be taken. So now we have a look on this chart and where the delays are occurring. So if you look at the left part, the orange bit of the chart, these are cases that are closed. And the orange bit of the chart is the amount of time cases spent at ITAC. And the blue part of the chart is where it's spent with either the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition or the Minister of Finance. Unfortunately, in the public record, we're unable to determine how much time was spent respectively between those two ministers. So we know there's the ITAC portion and there's the ministerial portion. 58% of all tariff investigations were ultimately found to be overdue. So a very small amount that were actually wrapped up on time. And the pattern continues. In fact, if anything, the pattern is getting considerably worse. So why are these delays occurring? And here we're speculating. We honestly have no firm idea, but we think reciprocal commitments could be one of the issues. So what happens here is you've applied for your duty increase. It's gone through ITAC. They've approved it. And they say to you, here's a contract you have to sign before you can get your increase approved. And you have to commit to some form of price control where you will not increase your prices at more than the rate of increase of your raw material costs. You have to make employment commitments, investment commitments, training commitments. And these are not budgets. You have to sign a contract, which is legally binding, saying that you will perform. Now, we're not aware of anyone who's been taken to court for breach of these contracts. However, signing the contract itself is quite an unnerving experience because you're having to predict for 3 years and commit to 3 years for something that you may not be able to see through. Just imagine for a moment, you had made your commitment right before COVID. You would now find yourself potentially having been in a very uncomfortable position of having to renegotiate those commitments. Now, of course, it's entirely possible that the minister would have been perfectly reasonable and renegotiated. But that is this minister. We don't know what the next minister will do. We have no idea what will happen with these commitments when somebody else takes a look at it or just decides that they want to enforce it. There is certainly a not immaterial risk. I would guess this is part of the delay as companies try to work out how they want to deal with these reciprocal commitments. We don't think reciprocal commitments are going to go away. However, we believe you should make available, ITAC, DTIC should make available the reciprocal agreement template to anyone who wishes to bring an application. So you should know upfront when you decide if you want to bring the application, if this is something that you are comfortable committing to. If you're not comfortable, you may choose to not bring the application. So we think it's important for you to be fully aware of what you are letting yourself into and then decide accordingly. The second problem is this confusion over the role of the Minister of Finance. So in 2018, there was a court case brought by Pioneer Foods, and Pioneer Foods had ordered a shipload of wheat to be brought into South Africa. And when the boat was on the water with all of the wheat, the duties were meant to reduce on wheat. And it wasn't reducing. They started panicking because a whole shipload of wheat is a lot of wheat indeed. And they went to court and said, please, you've got to get the Minister of Finance to implement. ITAC have taken their decision. The Minister of Trade at that time, Minister Davies, has taken his decision. It's really just the Minister of Finance who needs to rubber stamp this and implement it. And Minister Gigaba at that point was the Minister of Finance, and he said, no. I don't rubber stamp anything. I am, in fact, the final decision maker on when this duty will be imposed. And he went on to describe a process that occurs within National Treasury. And the court found in the minister's favor. Shortly thereafter, there was another case, this time brought by the South African Sugar Association. At this time, the application was for a duty change in the opposite direction. In other words, the duties were meant to go up. And essentially, they went to court on the same basis. And the court found again in favor of the Minister of Finance. We don't know exactly what the role of the Minister of Finance is. If we read the two court judgments, the court judgments appear to endorse the view that the Minister of Finance is the final decision maker on when duties can be imposed. What isn't clear at the moment is exactly how that process works. How does one get access to the Minister of Finance? What information does he have in front of him when he makes this decision? What are the outcomes of his own internal investigation that occurs within the Department of Finance? And so we don't know if perhaps these decisions are being taken quickly by ITAC, quickly by Minister Patel, and then rest on the Minister of Finance's desk while he decides when the best time would be to impose it. So again, this is all absolutely opaque. And so there's simply no way for us to get hard data on what happens in this process. There doesn't appear to be an expiry period to implement a decision. And this might seem counterintuitive, but the reason anti-dumping duties don't easily expire, there was an exception last year where one ran past the 18 months and had to be terminated. But that's an extremely unusual event, repeated only one more time in the 19 years of ITAC's existence. So why is it that these expiry don't happen with anti-dumping cases? They're taken on time, and that is because they have a hard locking. You have to wrap up an anti-dumping investigation in 18 months. We're proposing that the tariff regulations be amended to force investigations to terminate after 18 months. And I think this is really important. The issue here is not whether you're asking for a duty increase or removal or rebate, whatever the case might be, but simply that nobody benefits from the uncertainty created of decisions just taking forever to be implemented. Everyone is better off if you know at the end of 18 months, at the latest, I'm gonna have a decision. I might not like it, but I will know what it is and I can decide what to do, or I'll be happy for it. But if you're looking at investment, if there's been a duty increase application and someone is looking to invest R1 billion in a new plant, but they require the duty increase in order to move forward with it, and the decision doesn't come, you may very well find the delay on the investment also just exacerbating the situation. And so we believe tariff investigations need to have a termination point. And if you look again at the detail in the report that you download, you will see that just this is not well handled at all. And these cases are dragging on for longer and longer, just putting more and more uncertainty into the market. We are proposing that the minister issue a directive to say that all cases which are 3 months overdue or more to be finalized within the next 6 months. So that would mean you have your 6-month period. If you're more than 3 months over that, you're at 9 months. You should be given another 3 months to wrap it up. And that means within a 12-month period, all of these cases can be closed. Unless you think that's just an impossible task. Almost all of these investigations have been concluded by ITAC, and they're sitting with either the Minister of Trade or the Minister of Finance. There may be a few at ITAC, but the majority have already been completed at ITAC. The other issue are unpublished private settlements. So here what happens is I apply for a duty increase or removal, whatever the case might be. And for some reason, I decide to withdraw that application. Now, that withdrawal is not always published. So included in our list are some investigations which we believe were privately settled, but we're not entirely sure. This has quite far-reaching implications because while you have an open investigation, someone else cannot bring another application on the same tariff code. And so just the fact that you have an unpublished private settlement means that the perception is that someone else cannot bring an action on the same tariff code. So I think this is important. And again, we need to bring certainty back to the process. Nobody benefits from not knowing what is going on, irrespective of which side of this you're on. So yeah, just let's publish the outcomes of any privately settled decisions. Most importantly, say hello to us. Please go visit our new website, click to download your report. Just have a chat with us. We'd love to hear from you. If there are any questions, I'm going to turn on my video now and take them. Oh, good Lord. It's Mpumelelo, you've stopped my video, I believe. Tells me.
A few seconds. Apologies about that.
While we wait for the Zoom gods to sort out the video, Dan, hi, you had a question? Dan Pillay.
Hi, can you hear me, Donald?
I can hear you now. How's it, Dan?
Hi there, fine, thanks. Sorry, I just wanted to check if you were recording this meeting.
Yes, sir.
And yeah, I just see on the top left hand, so we'll get a copy of it later.
Yes.
Okay, great.
No problem. Roberto.
Thank you, Donald. I don't know, I cannot switch on the video, but that's not important. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you, Donald. Well spotted what you said, and all the issues you have raised, specifically those concerning the unpredictability and the uncertainty that all this situation creates for business, regardless of the origin of the business. Of course, I'm talking about European businesses in this case, is crucial. And we have also many cases where exactly applications for rebates or for increase of duties are jeopardizing important investment decisions. I fully support actually you way ahead. My question is rather, how do we make it pragmatic and concrete this way ahead? Because is there no way, for instance, where you can channel that proposal through BUSA, and then BUSA having a sort of BUSA position paper in this respect, where all other business associations then interested in associating to this démarche can do something? Or what can we do much more practically in order to bring all these ideas forward? Thank you.
Yeah, so Roberto, I agree, and I will be discussing this with BUSA. Well, some of the BUSA folk are here, but with a more kind of direct angle to say, I think this has to be resolved. I think BUSA is the correct body to do that with. But I am concerned, we're sitting with decisions here without getting into what the decision should be, if it should be to give an increase or not, or to remove duties or not. Uncertainty is just the enemy of investment. And we desperately need investment in South Africa. The idea that we can't resolve something like this just is very alarming. And there's so much money tied up in this that it feels unproductive in the extreme. And I'm not entirely sure why this has gone on for so long. But Roberto, I'd love to invite you to our new offices. Come have a cup of coffee with me, and we shall talk about it. Sam. Sam, you're muted.
Okay, I think you've got me now. It's
Sorry.
Paul Theron speaking. Can you hear me?
Oh, who's speaking now?
Paul Theron.
Hello, Paul.
Okay,
Yes,
you can go first, thanks.
I've got Sam Lagar also on the line.
Yeah.
Donald, thanks for the presentation. Very interesting. I didn't realize that the investigations were taking so long. I just want to sort of raise a few, how would you call it, devil's advocate type questions and say, the biggest problem that ITAC itself would have is that they have to go out into the public domain to consult with other industries that are affected and whether they object or not to the application. And if you put a time limit on how long it can, an application can take, the objectors could play naughty games and delay the process until that expiry period comes up. So again, you know, that is probably just to point out where one possible hitch could come in having a final hour deadline. The other thing is when it comes to the ministers of trade and industry and finance, the biggest problem that we seem to have these days, in my opinion, as humble as it is that we've got a whole new political game being played out, between the ministers and ministers trying to enforce their own, how would you say, ideals on economic policy. And these are often causing extreme problems in themselves. And now we've got the Minister of Finance and Treasury who have always been antagonistic towards trade and industry and have always tried to override them when it comes to economic policy. So they're now finding a way in which they can do it. And it's just sort of more of a comment that this might be something that is causing the delays. And in the old days, for example, the main role of the Minister of Finance was to evaluate the effect on foreign currency losses and gains by any application and the long-term effect thereof. But I think that's as much as I want to say at the moment, just to give you an idea of some of my thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, so Paul, to your first point, of course, with everything, there's a trade-off. And so having an expiry period could have some people play games, but that option is available to them in anti-dumping cases. And anti-dumping cases don't run past the 18 months. Last year was strange with COVID. I think things just didn't work at ITAC as well as they should. But the 18 months don't easily run over. So I think that's less of a risk than we would think. But also the delays tend to not sit with ITAC. So there are times when ITAC would run over their 6-month committed time. But the delays by far sit post ITAC with one of the two ministries. And so I think that's probably less of an issue than we would think. In other words, at that point, the investigative part of the work is done and the policy decisions now need to be taken. And then on the Minister of Finance's role, I mean, these two court cases caught everyone unaware, including us. No one knew exactly what was happening with it, including many people at senior levels in places like DTIC. But they happened, and they are what they are right now. And I don't think it's a good thing to have our legislation incomplete and expecting people to somehow be able to know about the court cases. I think the courts have had two decisions on this. It's time that the legislation be amended to reflect the court's decisions. Whether I think those decisions are good or bad is not relevant. They are current precedent, and I think it should be explicit. Sam?
Thank you very much, Donald. Yes, indeed, you are revealing a very important information that we may not be aware of. But at least you have addressed my question, because I was about to ask of all these outstanding, what do you call, investigations. Where is this delay in terms, is this delay at the level of the investigations by ITAC, or is it between the ministerial level? But at least in your response now to Paul, you tried to address that specific matter, because I was perhaps under the impression that maybe that this delay is due to outstanding information that needs to be put forward by the applicants. But in your response to that, you made it very clear that no, the investigation is 100% done. All that is outstanding is the final approval of the determination or the recommendation by the ministers. That was my question in short. Thank you very much, Donald.
Thank you, Sam. Let me maybe add a comment to Sam's observation. So when a tariff investigation initiates, or a rebate, whatever the case might be, interested parties have 4 weeks to respond, and they can get an extra 2-week extension. So that is 6 weeks. At that point, ITAC will usually have all of the information from the applicants. They would have all of the information from the respondents. And then they would go through that, ask questions, verify data. Perhaps they'll have an oral hearing where people can present their case to the commission. But it's not a process that inherently takes a lot of time. You know, if a case is really big, and let's say there are 20 respondents, yes, then one can understand it can run a little bit longer. But to go from 6 months to over 2 years is just, that's an enormous difference. And it's inconceivable to me that you can't resolve something within 24 months, for example. Perhaps added to that is there is silence while this is happening. So we shouldn't forget that no one is giving feedback. Well, this is where we are. We'll have a decision soon. There's no calendar published on when people can expect the decision. So these decisions, you know, they can take 2 years, 3 years, and then one day out of nowhere, they're published. So I think that the problem is made worse by the silence that accompanies the process, which again, I don't think is particularly good. Yeah. I see some questions in the chat, which I'm going to quickly address. Let me have a look. Colin, how will ITAC receive this report? I want to just say by email, but I suspect that's not what you're asking. I don't know how ITAC will receive it. The report is simply factual. I'm not particularly critical of ITAC here. I don't believe ITAC is the biggest part of this problem. But I think there is a problem and it needs to be addressed. And the cost of the problem is extremely high. So it should be receiving attention commensurate with the values that we're attaching to this. So if we're looking at 1.2 billion in potential uncollected duties, if we're looking at another 2 billion in over-collected duties that could be back in industry, these are not trivial amounts at all. You know, some urgency has to be brought to bear in my view. Let me see if there are any other questions. Paul, your question on the chicken wings. So the question here, there's not a circumvention question. I don't believe that there is any issue on wings particularly. Wings is fairly straightforward. We consume considerably more wings than we produce. And so there's a shortage and wings get imported. And that's not a problem we're going to resolve, because you can't grow chicken wings. You have to attach all the other bits of the chicken. And so it seems inconceivable that there's ever going to be a way for us to increase wing production without the rest of chicken. And that would put the whole balance of the carcass out. So I don't think it would undermine anything. Plus, a chicken wing is a very clearly identifiable item. So, when SARS has a look at it, it's very easy to tell the difference between a wing and a drumstick or something. So I think it would be a very difficult loophole to exploit. Plus, the proposal that had been put forward in BRM's application is that they have to get a permit. They need to go to ITAC, request a permit, and ITAC has to give the permit before the rebate is applicable. So they have to say, we need to bring in 10 containers of wings, give us a permit. ITAC assesses the situation and only then issues. So the idea absolutely is not to undermine the current poultry industry protection. I'd maybe add, Paul, the easiest way for the domestic industry to resolve it would be to simply supply the wings, and then no one would, of course, have a problem. Bashni, I'm just going to blush and say thank you very much. Louise, to your two questions, if there is agreed timelines, surely one can approach ITAC in sticking to the timelines? Yes, absolutely. Secondly, how much of time delay is due to the client having to submit data and this extending timelines? Almost none, Louise. In fact, it can't be the clients, whether applicants or respondents, because you have a firm period. So if you've got 4 weeks to submit and you submit in week 5, your information is discarded. So there is the timelines are very tightly managed by ITAC. So no, I don't believe there's anything on the client side that can delay it, because the law just doesn't allow it. The minute you're over, ITAC will just say your information is not being accepted. Let me see. I see another question or two popping up here. Colin, yes, to the manufacturing circle. Yes, absolutely. We will be talking to the manufacturing circle. Some of them are on the session today. And yeah, we will raise it both with BUSA Manufacturing Circle, as well as if any other associations, irrespective of which side of this you're on, if you're impacted by this, we're happy to have a conversation with you. Is there anyone else? Sam, is that a legacy hand up, or do you have another question? What we will do at the end of this, all of you will be given a copy of the report. The video will be uploaded. That will take a few days, but everyone that's registered, even if you couldn't make it today, will receive a copy of the video as well. If you have any questions, if you dispute any of the information in the report, please let me know. We're not precious about this. If you want to see the data we have, then speak to us about it. The idea here is to get a conversation going, to kind of deal with this. We also want companies to realize that you're not alone. This is not one company facing a delay. It's almost everyone, and it's in every conceivable direction. Yeah, that's what I have to say. Thank you so much for attending. Please go and visit our new website at xagta.com, and we shall hopefully speak soon. Take care.